Okay, so we're talking about horseshoe crabs. And again, my name is Joe Reynolds. I'm president director of Safe Coastal Wildlife, a nonprofit, fairly new nonprofit along the Jersey Shore. We've been around, this is our third year now, but we've been monitoring horseshoe crabs for over 10 years now, when we used to be a watershed group. Okay, so I always like to start off just thinking that really nobody or very few people know what a horseshoe crab is, and just really start from the very beginning about what is a horseshoe crab. So, you know, why do we go out and monitor these strange looking critters that have been around for a long period of time? What is a horseshoe crab? Well, believe it or not, there are actually several species of horseshoe crabs. There's just one that we are familiar with that hang out along the East Coast of the United States of America, but there are actually 3 other species of horseshoe crabs. And I don't think many people are familiar with that fact, that there are other species of horseshoe crabs. And all the other species of horseshoe crabs, the 3 other species of horseshoe crabs, hang out in Asia. That's where they live, in the Pacific Ocean. And unfortunately, the reason I bring this up is not only because it's an interesting fact that not many people realize, is that those 3 species, all of them are threatened and endangered. Those populations are extremely endangered. And the reason for that is loss of habitat. So, and that very, very easily can happen here along the East Coast. I can tell you right off the bat, I know when I was a kid, and I'm sure many people could chime in saying the same thing, there was a lot more horseshoe crabs along the Jersey Shore and along the Northeast and Southeast and all over. And unfortunately, we've been losing our horseshoe crabs for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But loss of habitat, loss of spawning habitat is really what I'm talking about, right? So we know the horseshoe crabs need to come up at least once a year up onto beaches and to spawn and lay eggs and start the next generation. And so when you don't have that spawning habitat because you've bulkheaded the beach, or you've created marinas and piers or boardwalks, or, you know, a whole bunch of coastal development, what it might be, that has limited your spawning habitat for horseshoe crabs. And because there's just an incredible amount of development happening along the coastlines in many parts of Asia, there is just very limited spawning habitat for horseshoe crabs out in Asia. So those species, they're not doing all that well, and we hope that doesn't happen to our species along the East Coast. Again, I'm going to ask everybody to please mute yourself. If you have your microphone on, please shut it off. It's just a distraction for other people who want to listen. All right, so the species in North America is the most abundant in the world and ranges on the Atlantic coast from Maine to the Yukon Peninsula. And that's the one that we're focused on here. We're focused on the Mid-Atlantic species of horseshoe crabs that can be found here in New Jersey along the Jersey Shore. So the Atlantic horseshoe crab, also known as the American horseshoe crab, Limulus polyphemus, is what we study here at Safe Coastal Wildlife. So Limulus polyphemus, it's a strange Latin name. It means, the limulus means slanting, unusual, or crooked, and polyphemus is a Greek term that signifies a one-eyed giant. So basically, when they were trying to figure out what is a horseshoe crab, somebody came up with the idea that it looks like an unusual one-eyed giant. Please mute your microphone, please.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. We did it, Mavis.
You did it?
We did it.
Good job, honey.
Oh shit.
So the Atlantic horseshoe crab is a species of marine arthropod, which is an invertebrate animal having an exoskeleton, a segmented body, and paired jointed appendages. Many arthropods also have compound eyes for visions. And so when I say that, you might be thinking, okay, well, that sounds sort of similar. It sort of sounds like a spider, and you wouldn't be totally wrong with that. So some examples of these species are scorpions, crabs, butterflies, spiders, shrimps. These are all sort of related to horseshoe crabs. but they're really not related closely to crabs. And they're really, of course, they're not really related all that closely to butterflies or to shrimps, but they are more closely related to spiders and scorpions. And if you look at that tail of the scorpion, it looks somewhat like the tail of a horseshoe crab. And that certainly is a reason why they are related. Although the word crab is part of the name, the horseshoe crab is more closely related to spiders and scorpions than to true crabs. The horseshoe crab is not actually a true crab, but a member of the ancient group of arthropods closely related to spiders and scorpions. So even though we call them crabs, again, people sometimes when they name species, they're not, they don't have enough information, enough scientific information to properly name these species, to name these animals, to name these critters. And so a long time ago, when somebody was looking at horseshoe crab, sort of looked like a crab to them, and it sort of looked like a horseshoe, and they named it the horseshoe crab. But we know now that's not truly a horseshoe, it's not truly a crab. It's more related to spiders and scorpions. But even though I say that, horseshoe crabs are not poisonous like scorpions. And even though the tail looks scary, the tail is not there to hurt you at all. The tail is just acts as a rudder to move in the water more easily, and also to right themselves up when they get stuck in the sand, when they get turned over in the waves. Their tail helps them to turn themselves over again. So don't be frightened by the tail. The tail's not there to hurt you. And they're not there to bite you as well too, like spiders. They just don't have a mouth to bite you. So they're really sort of docile species. We like to think they're friendly species. They don't harm people. I don't know of anybody that's ever gone to the hospital because they've been bitten or harmed by a horseshoe crab. I don't know. There might be somebody somewhere, but I don't know anybody. I don't know of any incidents that anybody's ever gone to the hospital because they've been harmed by a horseshoe crab. So most crustaceans are also known as decapods. Decapods known to have 5 sets of appendages or 10 legs and claws. But if you take a good look at a horseshoe crab, it actually has 6 appendages, 12 legs and claws. So hence another reason why it's not really related to a crab. They have 12 legs and claws or 6 appendages. Also another big difference between horseshoe crabs and true crabs is that horseshoe crabs have no antennae. The no antennae or antennae. Antennae on animals are primarily used to detect their environment. Horseshoe crabs are evolutionary survivors that have been around for 400 million years. Let me just go back to this one slide. So horseshoe crabs don't have antennae, but how do they figure out what their environment's like? So crabs and shrimp do. How do they figure out what their environment is all like? They actually have lots of different eyes, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. And those eyes eyes all over their body, and their eyes really help to pick up what's going on in the environment. We'll talk about that in a minute because that's important to how we monitor horseshoe crabs. So horseshoe crabs are evolutionary survivors that have been around for about really over 400 million years. They've been around for a long period of time. They predate the dinosaurs and the earliest amphibians. When we were first figuring out what was going on with the horseshoe crab population, we knew the horseshoe crab population was going down. Lots of people had ideas that maybe it was water pollution, but you got to remember that horseshoe crabs have been around so long. I mean, they've been around when like the dinosaurs died out because of the meteors. And so we know that water quality was probably pretty bad back then. Horseshoe crabs have been around for over 400 million years, close to 450 million years. So they've been through a lot. And so we find out that water quality is not a big deterrent for horseshoe crabs, but loss of habitat or over harvesting is a big reason why horseshoe crab populations are going down. Loss of habitat and over harvesting are the 2 big reasons why horseshoe crab populations are going down. So horseshoe crabs have remained largely unchanged in appearance for really over 400 million years. You could take a look at this graph. This is what they looked like, and this is what they look like today. And they really haven't changed all that much. And that's why we call them living fossils. So there's lots of critters that have been around for a long period of time. Sea turtles have been around for a long period of time. Sharks have been around for a long period of time. But all those species have changed. Sea turtles used to be huge. In order to live with the dinosaurs, they had to be really big, and they have shrunk in size. But horseshoe crabs, if you go back 400 million years ago, it looks pretty much like a horseshoe crab. They really haven't changed all that much. And so if you take a time machine back a long, long time ago, you would see horseshoe crabs that pretty much look like horseshoe crabs today. And that's why we call them living fossils. They really haven't changed all that much. That doesn't mean that when you pick up a horseshoe crab, it's 400 million years old. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the appearance of the horseshoe crab hasn't changed at all, or really all that much, in over 400 million years. And that's why we call them living fossils. So why are horseshoe crabs important to protect? What value do they have? So as I mentioned before, we've been monitoring horseshoe crabs for over 10 years now. And I remember when we first started out monitoring horseshoe crabs, people would often come up, because over in Atlantic Highlands, we monitor horseshoe crabs near a bar. It's a suburban urban area, folks. And so, so it's not pristine wilderness here along Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay. So I remember there was a couple of people that came out of the bar. They had a couple of adult beverages, and they were like, "Oh, why do you guys? What are you doing? Who cares about horseshoe crabs? You know, what value do they have? Why do you guys spend your time at night getting wet studying horseshoe crabs? What value do they have?" So I always like to spend a couple of minutes talking about the value of horseshoe crabs, just so we're all on the same page. And in case you run into any sort of people that might give you trouble, you could easily answer that question. So one of my favorite reasons here at Safe Coastal Wildlife, obviously, is because horseshoe crabs are really important to shorebird migration. So right now, we're getting ready for the big shorebird migration that's happening in May and June. These are birds that travel hundreds, if not thousands of miles from the tropics. They stop along the shores here in New Jersey or in Massachusetts or Virginia, wherever it might be, and they feed on different things. They might feed on small little clams or shrimp, but one really important thing they're looking for is horseshoe crab eggs. Horseshoe crab eggs. Why horseshoe crab eggs? Because they're really fatty. They're really fatty. There is some evidence that people did eat horseshoe crab eggs, native people in Mexico. There is some evidence that they did eat horseshoe crab eggs in Mexico. I don't know if they still do that today. I know we don't eat horseshoe crabs at all really here in New Jersey, though there are some people that do around the world. But I do know that the horseshoe crab eggs are really, really fatty. And it's perfect energy, excellent energy for these birds that travel hundreds and thousands of miles. They stop here. They need high impact fatty food to give them the energy to continue, because where they lay their eggs is not here in New Jersey, but oftentimes way up in the Arctic, way up in the tundra, far away, like another 2,000-3,000 miles away from New Jersey is where they lay their eggs. So they need really high energy food to get them going, and horseshoe crab eggs are the perfect thing for them to do. So by the end of May, around half a dozen species of birds, such as red knots and sanderlings, dudlings, ruddy turnstones, and sandpipers will arrive from the tropics to Sandy Hook Bay, Delaware Bay, and other estuarine sites along the Jersey Shore to feed and double their body weight by feeding on horseshoe crab eggs. You know, if you take a look at these birds when they arrive, they're often thin, they're weak, and so they need to spend a couple of days, maybe a week or so, to really bulk up. And they, you know, even though they can feed on other food, like small crabs and shrimp and things like that. Again, horseshoe crab eggs, because they're so fatty, really gives them the energy they need in a short period of time. So this is what the eggs look like, almost like tiny little peas. This is what the eggs look like, and it's just loaded with fat and energy. This is what the birds are looking for. And so their eggs are essential food source for many migrating shorebirds, including sandpipers, sandlings, and ruddy turnstones, and their eggs and larvae are consumed not just by birds, but also by fish as well too. American eel, killifish, weakfish, silverside, summer flounder, winter flounder. A number of species of fish also depend on horseshoe crab eggs. And so, you know, one reason that we don't have many shorebirds here along Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay, why it's not a hot spot, and perhaps maybe one reason why the fishing for some of these species like weakfish is not as good as it used to be, is because the horseshoe crab population is declining or is not as robust as it used to be. So what happens is, you know, you might be thinking to yourself, well, if all these animals are eating the eggs, how can the horseshoe crabs really reproduce? Well, we need lots of horseshoe crabs. So if you look down in Delaware Bay, where there's still a viable population of horseshoe crabs, they have so many horseshoe crabs there that they often dig up other horseshoe crab eggs. And these are the eggs that the birds and the fish are eating on. So we need lots of horseshoe crabs to lay lots of eggs. And that provides the food for the birds and for the fish. If we just have a few horseshoe crabs, that doesn't provide any food really for birds and fish. And that's why we don't have really, this is not a hot spot for migrating shorebirds. We do see them, but it's not a real hot spot like it is in other places along the East Coast, because migrating shorebirds, they don't have the beaks to dig into the sand. They don't dig into the sand. They need lots of horseshoe crabs to do the digging for them. So these are some of the birds that really depend on horseshoe crabs to give them energy as they're migrating through. They stop along New Jersey and then head up north to lay their eggs up in the Arctic and start a family up over there. Red knots are really important. They really depend on it, really solely depend on red knots. They begin their journey all the way down in Terra del Fuego, Patagonia. It's a 10,000 mile journey just about. And they stop here in New Jersey looking for horseshoe crab eggs. But there are also plovers and sandpipers and ruddy turnstones, really some beautiful birds. Some of the most beautiful birds you ever see in your life are these migrating shorebirds, and they depend on horseshoe crabs to give them energy to continue their migration. So as I mentioned, the red knot is just really totally dependent on horseshoe crab eggs to give them the energy to continue. Without it, it's one reason why the red knot population is going down, is in decline as well too, because there's just not enough horseshoe crabs to produce enough eggs for the red knot population to continue. And so the red knot population is like close to 10,000 miles, right? They begin all the way at the southern tip of South America. They stop at Brazil, and then they fly all over the ocean. And then they stop often in New Jersey, and then they feed on horseshoe crab eggs, hopefully, and then continue up into the Arctic. And I'm just going to ask if you make sure your microphone is on mute. If it's not on mute, please do that, because the feedback is throwing me off, and it's probably throwing other people off who are trying to listen to the program. But we'll open up to questions pretty soon. If you do have a question, please add it to the what am I thinking of? Oops. To the chat. Please often it to the chat. Okay, so red knots, again, really important. We want to continue our migrating shorebirds, really, really important. So are horseshoe crabs important to people? They're important to shorebirds, they're important to fish, but are horseshoe crabs important to people? They are, right? So we need them for medicinal uses. And there's some controversy with this, which we'll get into in a second or two. But for the last couple of decades, we've been using horseshoe crab blood to help us. Now, horseshoe crab blood is unique. First of all, you might come across a horseshoe crab. As you're monitoring horseshoe crabs, you might come across one that just looks really beat up. The shell is all cracked and it just looks like half dead, and it might be half dead because the need to breed is really strong in many animals, including horseshoe crabs. And so they'll just come up, they may be half dead, they'll spawn, and then they'll just expire. But their blood is what keeps them alive, because that blood really fights infection for them. And that's important for people. So their blood is blue. Horseshoe crab blood is blue. It's caused by the presence of copper. We know human blood is red because of the presence of iron. And this blue blood has unique bacteria fighting ability, which is used by pharmaceutical companies and the biomedical industries for important medical research and testing. So horseshoe crab blue blood is used by the pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturers to test their products for the presence of endotoxins, bacterial substances such as E. coli and salmonella that can cause fevers and even be fatal to humans. So if you received medication from a family doctor, if you received an injection, if you wear contact lenses, if you had some form of surgery, if you had stitches for a wound or surgical incision, if you received the vaccine, including the COVID-19 vaccine, if you had part of your body, a knee, hip, heart replaced or repaired, guess what? You could thank a horseshoe crab for that, because anything like that is always tested first on horseshoe crab blood to make sure it doesn't have any toxins on it that would harm us or even kill us. So before you got the COVID-19 vaccine, hopefully everybody or most everybody has had at least the first shot for COVID-19. You could thank a horseshoe crab for that. It was first tested on a horseshoe crab blood. So congratulations, you were made healthy by a horseshoe crab. Have you thanked a horseshoe crab lately? I venture guess most people probably don't realize that one reason why the vaccine is so successful is because of horseshoe crab blood. But it is controversial. So the main ingredient in that horseshoe crab blood is a substance called LAL. It stands for something, but it's such a big word, I have a hard time pronouncing it, but we call it LAL. And it's surprised because in 2011 article in Wired magazine, it estimated that a quart of it to be worth about $15,000. So it's big money. It's big money to get this blue blood. It's no surprise then that the number of crabs harvested by the US biomedical industry jumped 86% from 2004 to really close to 6,000 animals in 2013, and really more so by now. There are currently no restrictions on how many of the industry can take, because after technicians draw the blood, they send the crabs back out where some animals supposedly recover, but up to 40% died. And so it is controversial for that, but also too, we know that in New York Harbor, they do harvest crabs for the biomedical industry. Now the nearest lab is in Massachusetts. So they take horseshoe crabs from New York Harbor, including Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay. But not, I shouldn't say directly from Sandy Hook Bay. The crabs in New York Harbor, they travel all around, right? So they're harvesting crabs on the New York side of Raritan Bay because they can't harvest crabs in New Jersey. There's a moratorium. But because, you know, crabs don't, they don't follow borders or boundaries, the crabs that are in Raritan Bay or Sandy Hook Bay just go up into the New York side and they get harvested and then they get sent to Massachusetts. But then once they get to Massachusetts, they don't come back to New Jersey. They don't come back to New York waters because they just set them free in Massachusetts. So that's a major reason why we're losing our horseshoe crab population in Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay and New York Harbor. There's a certain population that gets taken out for the biomedical industry and then just doesn't come back. And then there's a whole nother population that gets harvested for the bait industry, for eels and whelks. We don't eat so much eels and whelks in this country, a little bit, but there's a huge market for it in Europe and in Asia. And so you combine those two with the bait industry and the biomedical industry. And the fact that New York State doesn't really have that much protection for horseshoe crabs, including the female horseshoe crabs, which are bigger and produce the eggs, which are really good bait. And that's a major reason why our horseshoe crab population is going down. So horseshoe crabs, there's a value, there's a dollar sign on our horseshoe crabs. You know, we just throw them in a bucket, they're bait, they're whatever, right? I feel sorry for the horseshoe crabs that are on the bottom of this barrel. You know, I feel sorry for them because they're probably having a hard time breathing right now. But we just consider them, you know, just a commodity. a substance. They're a dollar sign on them. And so obviously we feel different about that. They are a living species and they should be treated with respect. We could see, this is a little old, this is 2018, but the bait industry and the biomedical industry, these are the two industries that take out the horseshoe crabs. And the biomedical industry should bring back our horseshoe crabs in Raritan Bay and in New York Harbor, but they often don't. And then we know the commercial bait industry takes largely the females because they are bigger and they do have the eggs, which makes good bait for catching eels and whelks. And again, because New York State doesn't have that much protection for horseshoe crabs, in New Jersey, there's a moratorium on horseshoe crabs. So no one can harvest any horseshoe crabs in New Jersey. You can't do it for bait. You can't do it for the biomedical industry. In Delaware, the state of Delaware, you can harvest males, but you can't harvest females. And lots of states have that, where they do have protection for the females. But in New York State, they hardly have any protections at all. And they take out, over like 200,000 crabs every year. And a big chunk of that is taken out of New York Harbor. So how do I know all this? How do I know all this? Well, because we've been monitoring horseshoe crabs for a long time, over 10 years now. And when we started doing this, we had no idea that that people were harvesting horseshoe crabs in New York Harbor, in Raritan Bay. We just knew the population wasn't doing that well. There was less horseshoe crabs as when I was a child, or even 20, 30 years ago, there's less horseshoe crabs. Why is that? We thought it was water pollution, but it's not that. And so the only reason we know it's because of harvesting is because we've been monitoring horseshoe crabs. There's no one monitoring horseshoe crabs in Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay, other than us, other than Safe Coastal Wildlife. So the American horseshoe crab, or the Atlantic horseshoe crab, is found along the Atlantic coast, spending summers in the shallow coastal waters of estuaries and bays, and winters offshore in the mud. Though there is some thinking that maybe not all horseshoe crabs go offshore, there is perhaps a certain population that stays in the bay year round. They usually walk along the bottom, feeding on sea creatures, worms, young clams, things like that. And so there are many decades of interest in Delaware Bay. They've been monitoring horseshoe crabs in Delaware Bay for a long time now. They've been monitoring the bird populations down there and the horseshoe crab populations in Delaware Bay. And there's many organizations that do that. But up along here in New York Harbor, there's really not much. On the New York side, there is another couple of organizations, New York City Audubon and some other organizations do monitor horseshoe crabs up in Jamaica Bay and that area, but along Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay on the Jersey side, we are the only organization that monitors horseshoe crabs along Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay. So we take it very seriously. This is a big reason why we do take it seriously. Horseshoe crabs are important to the ecology, they're important to people, and we want to know more about our horseshoe crab population along the northern Bayshore region of the Jersey Shore. What's going on, right? So everybody loves to find a horseshoe crab on the beach. We all do it. We all love it. It's exciting when you do it, right? And horseshoe crabs are very sensitive to light. So as I mentioned before, they have eyes, but not just two pairs of eyes or one pair of eyes. They have several pairs of eyes all around their body, and they're very sensitive to light. So they're very sensitive to when it's very bright, like during a new moon, and when it's very dark, like doing a new moon. Or sorry, very bright like a full moon and very dark like a new moon. So they're very sensitive to that. And that's the best time to go out looking for them as they're spawning and laying their eggs, is on new moon and full moon evenings. So if you look at our dates when we monitor horseshoe crabs, it's on full moon and new moon evenings because they are very sensitive to light. And so horseshoe crabs have 10 eyes and can see UV light. There's eyes all around their body, all around their shell, even on their tail, there's some light. And perhaps there's even more eyes that we haven't picked up on, more light sensitive receptors on their body. When I say eyes, it's not true eyes. It's not like something that's going to wink at you. They're more something that will pick up light around their body. And then they have those two compound eyes. Those are the major ways that they see, but there's also other eyes around their body. So the horseshoe crab has numerous small eyes called photoreceptors on its top shell and along its tail. Sensitive to light, they help synchronize the crab's internal clock with daily cycles of light and darkness. And again, the best time to see horseshoe crab spawning is during the nighttime. Doesn't mean they won't come out during the daytime and spawn. They certainly will, especially if there's lots of horseshoe crabs like in Delaware Bay. They're going to come out during the daytime and the nighttime. If you go down in Florida, they spawn all year long in Florida because it's warm enough to do that. And so you can be walking along the beach in Florida and you could see a pair of horseshoe crabs spawning in the daytime or the nighttime all year long. So it just depends on where you are, and it just depends on how many horseshoe crabs there are. But up here along Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay, the best time to really count them is at night. So our season here in New Jersey is May and June. That's when we go out and look for crabs. In Delaware Bay, because again, they have so many crabs or more crabs than we do here in Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay. In Delaware Bay, they use transects to count crabs. So they'll throw this on the beach randomly and then count the crabs in this square. Might be, I think, 1 meter by 1 meter or 3 meters by 3 meters, along that lines. And they'll just count the crabs in that transect because there's so many crabs down there, or more crabs than we have up here. Because we have so few crabs up here because they harvest, there's no protection or very little protection for crabs in New York State, which is a big player in New York Harbor. We have so few crabs. We had to modify the way we monitor crabs. We don't see this in Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay. This is in Delaware Bay. A long time ago, when I first moved up here and when I visited friends up in this area, a long time ago, you would see glimpses of this in Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay. But I would be surprised if you saw something like this, especially during the daytime, maybe a little bit like this in Cliffwood Beach. But more often than not, you get to see things like this. This is really what we find nowadays along Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay. Scattered amounts of horseshoe crab activity on a beach, small amounts, small clusters scattered about on a beach. This is what we find nowadays. So we had to modify the way we monitor horseshoe crabs up along here because we don't have as many. So we found out that in Maryland, they monitor horseshoe crabs like the way we do now, where we follow this crab line. So we have just adopted the way they monitor horseshoe crabs in Maryland to the way we do it here. So with overall so few mating crabs, we follow a crab line. Each beach will be sampled along a transect of 1,000 feet in the surf zone along an estuary. We just mark out 1,000 feet. We've been doing this a long time, so we know where 1,000 feet is now for the beach captains. These are the people that are in charge of horseshoe crab monitoring at each site. And so we know where the 1,000 feet are. We just walk along the line 1,000 feet along the surf zone. And so this is where most of the horseshoe crab activity is located. The horseshoe crabs will come up on the beach, especially as the tide's going out. They'll lay their eggs. Males are waiting in the surf line for females. And so this is where the action is, in that surf zone. And so we're going to be walking along 1,000 feet in that surf zone. You're going to get your feet wet. And so, be prepared for that, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But we're walking along that surf zone looking for horseshoe crabs. So the observer, the first person, will walk along the horseshoe crab line, count out loud the number of horseshoe crabs, and the recorder, the second person, records these observations on a data sheet. So you could have 2, 3, 4 people in the water looking for horseshoe crabs. When you find a horseshoe crab, you're going to pick it up, especially if it's a single, because we don't pick up horseshoe crabs that are in the process of mating and laying eggs. So if there's 2 horseshoe crabs together or many horseshoe crabs together, we don't pick them up. We only pick up single crabs because we don't want to disturb that whole process of laying eggs, which is really, really important. We'll pick up the single crab. So if you find a single crab, you pick it up, you want to identify the sex of that crab. Is it male or female, right? And we'll talk about that in a second. But basically, you pick up a crab and yell out, 1 single male. or one single female. And the person who's recording that data will write that down. If there's more than one observer, the additional volunteer observes should stay close to the main observer and help to locate horseshoe crabs that have been noted, right? So you stay together. One, you shouldn't be spread out, and you should never go back, never turn around and go back and do another 1,000 feet, right? You're going forward, staying close together in a group. One time we had one observer that was far away. I really didn't like that because the reason for that is because horseshoe crabs are not going to stay perfectly in a line. And so you could be counting the same crabs. We don't want to do that. We want to count new crabs. So stay together, close together. If there's 3 or 4 of you in the water, stay close together and count the crabs that come up to you or the crabs that you see. Don't spread out, stay together. And that way you decrease the amount of human error. You decrease the amount of possibly counting crabs twice. You don't eliminate it, but you decrease the probability that you're going to do that. And that's what we're trying to do. So the observer should always focus on counting horseshoe crabs that are spawning on the beach according to the following rules. Crabs above the surf zone directly on the beach, count all the crabs that are present. Crabs in the surf zone itself, count all that are present, including the submerged crabs that are obviously part of the spawning event. So again, we're in that surf zone. That's where we're walking. That's where we spend our time. That's where we're working, is in that surf zone where the waves are splashing, where the water is. That's where we're at. That's where we're counting crabs, in that surf zone. Again, don't turn around. Don't walk backwards and recount. You're walking along 1,000 feet of beach, right? Once you get to the end of that 1,000 feet, you are done. You are done counting crabs. That's it. Don't turn around and walk back because they're just going to recount crabs. So I can't stress that enough. Just walk 1,000 feet. Once you're done, that's it. You're done. Don't turn around. So this is the tally sheet. This is what the person who's recording all the information, this is what they're writing down. So again, we're counting single males and single females. We're also counting swimming pairs. These are crabs, they're together. There's a female and there's a male, and they're swimming around. They're looking for a place to lay their eggs. And so that's a swimming pair. Then there's a burrowed pair. This is usually the female who's buried into the sand, and she's in the process of laying eggs. So we count that as a burrowed pair. And there's a female and there's a male. And then there's a cluster. And clusters are always exciting because that's where you have one female, usually one female, and then you have many males fighting for the attention of that female. So we call that a cluster. And so that's usually one female and then 2 or more males fighting for the attention. And then occasionally we find some dead crabs on the beach as well too. We count that. So this is the tally sheet. This is what we're looking for: single male, single female, swimming pairs, burrowed pairs, cluster groups, and dead crabs. We count it all. And then at the end of the night, we tally it all up. We find out what the total crabs are. We also figure out how many crabs we tagged. And then I get all that data at the end and then send it out to everybody. So looking for solitary crabs, males and females, swimming or burrowed pairs, and then your clusters. And again, we're following that crab line, that 1,000 feet. We're just counting all the crabs within that 1,000 feet along the crab line. We're not looking outside the line. Somebody once asked me, what if I brought my kayak and I went kayaking, out in deeper water looking for crabs? Don't do that, because we're following that crab line of 1,000 feet within that surf zone. So if you're going out in deeper water past the surf zone, it's not part of our survey. It's not part of what we're looking for. We're just counting crabs within that surf zone of 1,000 feet. So don't go beyond the surf zone. That's not part of our study. Females tend to be larger than males. So here's a female. They tend to be 30% larger than a male. So how can you tell the difference between a male and a female? Chances are pretty good. Females are going to be bigger than males. Not always, but usually they're larger than males. Males are smaller than females. So these prehistoric creatures can grow about 20 inches in width, and that's almost 2 feet wide. The female's going to be pretty big. Sometimes you catch some really big females. And it's obvious because of the size that it is a female. But sometimes, not always, sometimes it's difficult to tell the sex of a horseshoe crab just looking at the size alone. So the easiest way of telling the sex of a horseshoe crab is by looking at its top claws, top appendages. So on male horseshoe crabs, the top appendages are going to look like boxing gloves. And that's not because horseshoe crabs are going to hit you or hit the female in the face. It's because the male horseshoe crab wants to grab hold of the females behind, and the female's going to drag that horseshoe crab, that male horseshoe crab around. She's going to dig a hole in the sand, lay the eggs. She's going to push the male forward. He's going to fertilize those eggs, and then they're going to go out and looking for another place to lay eggs. They lay about 80 to 100,000 eggs within a couple of nights, usually about 20,000 eggs in each location. And so it's a lot of work. And so they do it as a pair together, where the male is behind and the female's in front. And so the male is holding on to the female's shell. And that's why he has these claws, these appendages that look like boxing gloves. The females don't have it. So that's the easiest way to tell the difference between male and female. Look at those top appendages. If it looks like boxing gloves, it is a male horseshoe crabs. Females do not have those boxing glove appendages. This is what a brood pair looks like. Again, this is the female. She's in the process of laying eggs. We don't want to disturb that, so don't pick them up. We know for a fact that this is the female, this is a male. It's a brood pair. There's a male and female together. So we don't need to pick them up and try to figure out the sex. 99.9% of the time, if not 100% of the time, it's going to be female and male doing that. Swimming pair, almost like a brood pair, but they're swimming around. They're looking for a spot to lay their eggs. Again, we don't want to pick them up. You might invariably pick them up. You know, it is what it is, but try not to pick up a swimming pair. Leave them alone. We know, again, it's a male and a female. And this is what a cluster looks like. So again, there's one female, and these are all males trying to get the attention of that one female. That one male is trying to get the attention to become the partner of that female. The need to breed is strong in all these animals. And so they want to get the attention of this female. And so this is called a cluster. This is one cluster, and there's one female and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, looks like 8 male horseshoe crabs here. So that's a cluster. And we really don't want to disturb that. So leave that alone. Again, 99.9%, if not 100% of the time, there's one female there, and then the rest are all males. So with glove-like claws on its first pair of legs, the male hangs onto the female shell and is pulled up on the beach during the high tide line. The female pauses every few feet to dig a hole and deposit as many 20,000 pearly green eggs. The male then fertilizes the eggs as pulled over the nest. After the spawning is complete, the crabs leave and the waves wash the sand over the nest. It takes about 2 weeks to 4 weeks for those eggs to hatch. And then once they do, those little horseshoe crabs, they look like tiny adults. Tiny little baby horseshoe crabs look like adults. They get into the water and they swim away, and they spend most of their early life just hanging out in the mud and the muck and the sand, just eating on small things. You could sometimes tell the age of the crabs by the color of their shell. So the darker the shell, the more older it's going to be. The lighter in color, it's probably a newly adult. So horseshoe crabs, they molt. As they molt, they grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And so the lighter color shells means they've just become sexually active. They just had their last molt. And so the darker the shell means they've been around a lot longer. They haven't molted. And so they've been hanging out in mud and muck and different things like that. And so darker in color tends to be older crabs, and lighter in color means younger crabs. The horseshoe crabs you see on beaches are all adults. Sometimes, people have asked me, well, what if we count juveniles? You're not. 99.9%, if not 100% of the time, they're all adults. All adults. The juveniles just aren't sexually active. They're hanging out in the mud and the muck and the sand. They just don't have any need. There's no need for them to breed. The will to breed is not in them. They don't want to come up on the beach. They want to hide out and just look for food. So it would be very rare for you to count a juvenile crab because, again, they're just not sexually active. There's no need for them to come up on the beach. So all the crabs that we count are all adults. Again, sometimes you're going to count crabs that are really beat up. I mean, here's a crab that's alive. It's not dead. We found this on the beach. It's alive. Giant hole on its shell. Who knows where that hole came from? It could have came from, you know, humans, fishing, boats. It doesn't even have a tail. It lost its tail. And yet this crab, the need to breed in this crab was very, very strong. But chances are pretty good once the spawning season was done, it didn't last much longer than that. Look at that giant hole in that crab, giant hole, right? But again, that blue blood stops the infection, keeps them alive, and that crab is spawning and you know, creating the next generation of horseshoe crabs. So sometimes you're going to find some really beat up crabs on the beach. Just you can record that. It's always good to know. And then also you could tell the age of the crab by how much stuff it has on its shell. So once it becomes an adult, once it becomes sexually active, it doesn't molt anymore. It doesn't grow out of its old shell and grow a new shell. So as the horseshoe crabs, in their average age, they live to be about 20 years or so, 20, 25, somewhere around there, maybe 30, but more likely 20 to 25. It's a rough life. So I don't think they live all that long, but you can tell the age sometimes by the crab, by how much stuff it has on it. So this crab has lots of slipper shells. Chances are pretty good. It's a pretty old crab. It's been around for a long time. And again, once they become sexually active, they don't molt anymore. The size they are is from their last molt. Sometimes you're going to get crabs that are really, really big. And that's because of their diet. They had a really good diet when they were molting and they were able to grow really big. Here's a crab with a whole bunch of blue mussels on them and slipper shells. Again, this crab's probably been around for a long time. You could also take a look at the color of the shell. It's dark in color. And so that means it's an old crab. It's been around for a long time, lots of stuff on it, darker in color. It's at least been around for 20 years probably. Horseshoe crabs, another reason why they're really important is because they're almost like a little unique ecosystem. They do provide home and habitat to other critters. Again, because they don't molt when they're adults, mussels can grow on them, barnacles, sponges, worms, clams, different things can hang on to that shell or to the horseshoe crab. And so they become a little unique ecosystem onto themselves, which are important for the species that attach onto them. We also tag crabs. So one of the things we don't do it at every beach. Not every beach wants to tag crabs. It is, you know, it can be stressful for the crabs and for the people to tag crabs. So we don't do it at every beach. Not every group wants to tag crabs. We do tag crabs at some locations. And the reason we do tag crabs, it gives us a little idea on where the crabs move around. So without tagging crabs, we wouldn't really know where the crabs go when they're not mating, when they're not spawning. And so from tagging, over 10 years of tagging crabs, we do know that the horseshoe crabs in this area are the crabs that stay in this area. They don't go down to Barnegat Bay or Delaware Bay. There is some movement. Some of them do go a little bit into Long Island Sound, but not many and not that far. So the horseshoe crabs that we have in New York Harbor are our horseshoe crabs. They don't really go any place. So if we lose them, if they just harvest all the crabs in New York Harbor, we're going to lose all our crabs. And it's going to take a very long time for the crab population to rebound. So we found this out from tagging crabs. So we do get some information from tagging crabs. It gives us an idea of where they go after the spawning season. And so we feel it's important and we keep it going. This is the tagging sheet right here. This is what it looks like. So we have a couple of people tagging crabs and a couple of people writing down the information. We record the date, obviously, that we put the tag on. Up on top, we record the location, the beach captains. We want the beach captains' names in case we have any questions about the information. So we put the date down, the tag number, We put down the sex. We want to know if it's male or female. We measure the shell, across the shell. We measure the width of the shell, right? And then we also, if we know the age, we record that. Is the crab injured? We record that, and then any comments. The date, the tag number, the sex, and the PW number is all really important because that information goes to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. It's U.S. Fish and Wildlife that gives us the tags, and this is the information they want in return. We measure the width of the shell in millimeters, and I'm going to make the request to all the beach captains that we try really hard to measure in millimeters. I know in the past we've done a mixture. Some people have done measured in inches, and some have measured in millimeters. But let's try this year if we could all measure in millimeters. If we could just go out and get some rulers that can measure in millimeters, that would be a huge help. So if we could do that, that would be really, really important. So this is the information we want to record: date, disc, tag number, sex, and PW number. And then if you can get age and if the crab is injured, that's helpful as well too. Oops. So we want to measure the tag. We put the tag all in the same location. This is a tag female. This is a tag male. We put the tag in the same location on the side of the crab where there's lots of fibrous material. So we're not really hurting the crab. So, I mean, I don't talk horseshoe crab. I don't know what it really feels like to get a tag, a plastic tag put in you. Of course, I've had now the vaccines twice put inside of me. I think it sort of feels like that, where it's a little pinch. So that's where we put the crab, that's where we put the tag in. We drill a little hole and we push in the tag. And if you can see this picture over here, we put a little stopper on the drill itself to make sure the drill doesn't go in all that deep. So only single crabs will be tagged. We don't want to pick up crabs that are in the mating process. We don't pick up pairs. We don't pick up clusters. We only pick up single crabs. Those are the crabs that are going to be tagged. Never tag crabs that are in pairs or clusters. Crabs will only be selected for tagging activities within the monitoring area or the transect zone, that crab line on the beach after the crab has been counted or surveyed by an observer. Right? So we find a single crab, we yell out single male or single female. We give it then to the people that are going to put the tags on. They tag it, and then they put the crab back into the water. We try to be quick. Even though crabs, horseshoe crabs, can stay out of the water for a pretty long time, as long as the gills are moist, they could stay out of the water at least for 6 hours. Pretty long time. But it's a stressful time for them to get. I mean, it's no fun getting vaccines. I'm sure it's no fun for a horseshoe crab to get a tag on it. It's stressful. So we try to be quick by doing this. And so try to put, as quick as possible, put that tag in and get them back in the water as quick as possible. So tags will be attached to the left posterior or the rear point of the prosoma. This is the area we measure, the first section of the body. That's the width that we measure. There's a high concentration of fibrous material within the body in this area, which minimizes the bleeding. Sometimes if you drill a hole a little too deep, you're going to get some blue blood. Don't freak out. Again, it's copper-based blood, and it helps the crab protect itself from infection. But again, you don't want to go too deep. Try not to make it a habit of drawing blood. But if you do, don't freak out. Before drilling the attachment hole, we clean off we clean off the shell from barnacles and stuff like that near the attachment area, right? So we want to make sure that the tag, the plastic tag, the pin on the plastic tag fits in nicely in the hole and fits in securely. So a year or 2 years from now, if somebody finds this crab on the beach, that tag is still there and they report that information and we have an idea of where that crab is going. So make sure that tag is in securely and clean off that area of any barnacles or what. If you can. If you can't, then just let the crab go back in the water. We don't need to stress out the crab. So only put the tag in if you could do it safely for the crab. Again, this is where we're putting the tags, all along the East Coast. All the tags go in the same location for horseshoe crabs. It's a 532-inch hole drilled in the posterior point of the prosoma. And so that's the bit you want to get, 532. If you're going to tag, that's the bit you want to get. Try to put a little stopper up, generally about an inch up on the drill hole is where you want to put it. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll open it up to people. Some of the beach captains can maybe correct me on that, but I think it's about an inch up. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife recommends first cleaning the hole where it'll be drilled by rubbing the spot with alcohol. So the beach captains will give you some alcohol, and then also the drill should be dipped in betadine antiseptic solution, disinfect the drill before, whoops, I can't get this. Let me just go back here for a minute. Okay, so next the drill should be dipped in betadine antiseptic solution, disinfect the drill before making the hole in the shell of the prosoma. Okay, so I just want to stop here for a second. So you're going to have to clean the drill with rubbing alcohol each time, and then also dip the drill in betadine antiseptic solution. This has to be done, or I should say clean the hole with rubbing alcohol and then clean the drill with betadine solution every time. So every time you tag a horseshoe crab, you've got to do the same thing. So it's not just like in the beginning, you do it and then that's it. You just don't do it once. If you have 50 crabs to tag, you do this 50 times. So every time you're tagging horseshoe crab, make sure you clean out the spot. There's no barnacles on it. Clean the hole, clean the area where it's going to be with rubbing alcohol. And then also dip that drill into a betadine antiseptic solution. Beach captains should have this. If they don't, let me know. I'll give you the materials that you need. This, you have to do it every single time, right? The Fish and Wildlife recommends it. We recommend it as well too. It just makes sure that everybody is happy and healthy. We're happy and healthy, and the horseshoe crab is happy and healthy as well too. So again, if you have 100 crabs, you're doing this 100 times to put that tag in. All right, so the tag is attached by drilling a 532 hole. Sometimes you might get small tags. I think one time the Sandy Hook, the Plum Island group had small tags, and I didn't know why. And then it took me like a year to figure it out. There's two different types of tags. We try to get the larger tags that you use 532, but sometimes U.S. Fish and Wildlife makes mistakes and they give us the smaller tags. So you might need a different bit for that, which is the 7/64" for smaller tags. So again, just bring two if you can. Bring two drills, 532, 7/64. Sometimes, people make mistakes. So the tag is attached by drilling the hole through the left side of the prosoma near the dorsal edge, and then pushing the plastic pin with the tag into the hole as far as it will go. It shouldn't go all the way through the prosoma and come out on the other side. Don't jam it through, right? Just, you want to drill a little hole, push that through, and that's all you do. The procedure should be repeated for every individual that's going to be tagged. Again, if you have 50 horseshoe crabs that get tagged, same thing for 50 crabs. If you plan to tag crabs, please bring a cordless drill with tape on a 532" drill bit up. Here we go, 1/8 of an inch from the tip to the tag of the crabs, 1/8 of an inch. Also, we need to measure the tape. We need measuring tape and rulers that measure in millimeters. Again, we try to be consistent. We want to measure in millimeters. That's the information that's going back to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So I don't want to measure in inches anymore. Please measure in millimeters if we can. And then we also have a recite form too. We've been using it sporadically in the past. I'm going to make the recommendation that we try to use it more often. So sometimes we might find a horseshoe crab that's already been tagged. They tag horseshoe crabs up in New York State, in Plum Island, up in Jamaica Bay. We also have been tagging crabs for over 10 years around Sandy Hook Bay and Raritan Bay. Sometimes when we're monitoring horseshoe crabs, we're going to come across a horseshoe crab with a tag on it already. So that's called a recite, and we want to take note of that. We want to record that information. U.S. Fish and Wildlife likes to know that as well. They want to get that information. So we put the date, month, date, year, when we found it, the tag number, the sex, is it dead or alive? Is it injured? And any comments, and then the location. So your beach location, where you're monitoring. Are you monitoring at Cliffwood Beach, Union Beach, Keyport Harbor, Plum Island? Where are you monitoring your horseshoe crab? So put that on location, and then the date, the tag number, the sex, dead or alive, injured, and then comments. And that's called the resite. So sometimes you're going to come across a crab that's already been tagged. Don't put another tag on it. One tag is good enough for any horseshoe crab. Don't put another tag on it. But we do want to record that resite. All right, so safety first. Safety is really, really important. Safety for crabs, safety for people as well too. Really, we want to, we're at night, it's dark many times. People can fall, people can get injured. We don't want any of that. We want people to be happy and healthy and safe. So let's just go over some safety stuff here. So we require, it's COVID-19, we require all participants to wear a face covering during the entire time of the survey. Obviously now there's been some new recommendations by the state and by the CDC that perhaps we don't need to wear a face covering anymore. I'm just gonna keep it out there that if you wanna wear a face covering, it's probably a good idea to wear one. If you don't, we'll see. I'm just gonna keep it where we have to wear face coverings now. As we get closer and we find out more about the recommendations, we might relax that a little bit. Social distancing, you know, I mean, obviously we want people to feel safe. So if you feel safe wearing a face covering, please wear a face covering. If you feel safe social distancing, then please social distance. One thing we will do is we're going to be limiting participation each monitoring site to only about 5 or 10 people. That's because we don't need many people to monitor crabs or tag crabs. So in the past, you know, horseshoe crab monitoring is probably our most successful and most popular event that we do all year at Safe Coastal Wildlife. And sometimes, you know, people get really excited. They want to come out, especially if it's a beautiful night, it's a full moon. They want to come out and see horseshoe crabs. But we don't need 30 or 40 people to count horseshoe crabs. We just need 5 or 10 people. So, I mean, you're welcome to watch us. There's no reason for you not to watch us. You can watch us, but the actual participation of counting and monitoring and tagging, we just need no more than 10 people for that. So we're going to only open it up for 10 people to participate. That's not including the beach captains. The beach captains are in addition to that 10 people. Yeah, we only need 10 people to monitor and to tag crabs. If you're sick, please stay home. And I don't care what the CDC says or anybody, if you're sick, please stay home. We don't want anybody getting infected with anything, whether it's the common cold or COVID or whatever. I don't want to get sick. I want to be healthy. I want to enjoy my summer. So please, if you're sick, stay home. If you're someone you're currently living with who is sick, please just stay home. It's better off just staying home. And then when everybody's healthy and happy, then you can come out and join us and count crabs. But if you're sick, or if somebody's sick at home, if you have a child who's sick, or, you know, a family member that's sick, husband, wife, whatever it may be, just stay home and then come join us when everybody's healthy. All right, so very important. Never do anything you feel uncomfortable doing. Always think safety first. This is really important. I can't stress this enough. So you had a hard day at work, traffic, you're home, you're eating dinner, but you're tired. And then you're like, Joe Reynolds is asking me to come out and monitor horseshoe crabs. No, I'm not. Stay home. If you're tired, if you're, you know, frustrated, you're exhausted, angry, stay home. Because if you're frustrated and tired, chances are pretty good you're going to get hurt. That's when accidents happen. So again, we only want people who are happy and healthy to come out and monitor horseshoe crabs. Don't come out if you're sick, if you're tired, if you have a headache, if you're, you know, you just don't feel right. Stay home. Don't do anything you feel uncomfortable doing. We don't need you. We have people. Again, horseshoe crab monitoring is very successful. We got plenty of volunteers. So don't think you have to come out. You don't. Please stay home and we'll get you when you're feeling good and feeling healthy and feeling happy. All right, one thing that's come up is we have a lot of dead fish in the water now, unfortunately, around Raritan Bay and Sand Hook Bay. A lot of dead menhaden. And so recommendations from the state is that people shouldn't go in the water, swimming or surfing, or if they do, to wash their clothes. And so I'm recommending that, and of course this will change perhaps when we get closer, but at least for the month of May, I don't want anybody going in on just their bare legs or bare feet. So everybody has to wear shoes, absolutely, but no one's allowed to go in the water without wearing boots, hip boots, or waders. All right, so I'm just gonna tell that to all the beach captains. If you don't have knee boots, hip boots, or waders, don't go into the water. We're not gonna let you go in the water because of this vibrio bacteria. If you have any scrapes, cuts on your legs, feet, you could get sick from that. And again, we don't want anybody getting sick. We don't want anybody not feeling happy and healthy. So if you don't have hip boots, knee boots, or waders, we're not going to let you go in the water and count crabs. We're not going to let you go in that surf zone. You could stay on the beach and look for crabs, but we're not going to let you go in the water. We're not going to let you get in the surf zone and get wet and look for crabs. I would make the recommendation, if you're going to be a volunteer with Safe Coastal Wildlife, not just for horseshoe crab monitoring, but for other things, it's probably a good idea just to invest in some hip boots or waders, especially as the seining season's coming around. We go out seining with a long net looking for fish. We always ask for volunteers for that. It's probably a good idea just to go on Amazon, get yourself a $60 pair of waders or whatever you want to do. Just wash them off. Don't put them in the sun. Don't leave them in your car. Keep them in the garage, dry them off, and it should last you at least for a year. So I would make the recommendation: get yourself a pair of waders, and then you could help us with all the activities we do at Safe Coastal Wildlife. But right now, at least for the month of May, and then we'll reevaluate it come June. But for the month of May, we're not going to let anybody go in that surf zone looking for horseshoe crabs unless you're wearing some boots, knee boots, hip boots, or waders. We don't want anybody getting sick because of the vibrio. And then also, we're going to ask you to wash your hands when it's all done as well too. So arrive at the designated beach site at least 30 minutes prior to the scheduled time to meet the beach captains. The beach captain will provide volunteers with specific information for your location. You'll be surveying in groups, no individuals. Again, nobody's wandering off on their own. We don't want anybody wandering off on the beach doing things on their own. We work as teams. We work as a team to tag crabs. We work as a team to monitor crabs. So nobody should be off on their own doing anything by themselves. We don't want individuals. We work as a team together. Everybody's a team working together. All volunteers are required to fill out the volunteer waiver. So please, if you haven't done so, I know many people have, but if you haven't, please fill out that volunteer waiver. You can't really participate in really too much of what we do at Safe Coastal Wildlife unless you fill out that volunteer waiver. We're all volunteers. I'm a volunteer. None of us really get paid. And even if we did get paid, we would still ask you to fill out that volunteer waiver. It just protects our organization. It protects you, protects everybody that's connected with the organization, just to make sure we're all happy and healthy and we all understand the rules. So please fill out that waiver. It's really important. If you don't fill out the waiver, we really can't let you participate in all the fun things that we do. If you're under 18, you got to be accompanied by an adult. Please don't drop off your child and say, okay, here you go, Joe Reynolds. Here's my child. I'll come back in an hour and pick that child up. Don't do that. It's only happened once. And it shouldn't happen again. So please, scout groups, students, children, if we'd love to have you, but you got to be accompanied by an adult, parent, teacher, scout leader, somebody, legal guardian, somebody who's over 18. So please, especially in Atlantic Highlands, it's a very kid-friendly beach. So we love to have you, but you got to be accompanied by an adult. No running, please, no running at all. Nobody should be running around on the beach, especially when it gets dark. Again, there's so much stuff on the beach. There's driftwood, there's bricks, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Sometimes there's little holes in the beach sand itself that people have dug for whatever reason. And so no running, because people very easily can trip and fall. So please, no running, no running, no running. I can't stress that enough. There's buckets, there's driftwood, there's a whole bunch of stuff on the beach. And at night, it's just very difficult to see that. So please, no running at all on the beach. No bare feet. Again, even if you're not going in the water, there's so much stuff on the beach. There's sharp shells. There could be needles, just tons of garbage, unfortunately, on the beaches. You know, we're downstream from New York City, so there's lots of crap on our beaches. So please, no bare feet, no running. And again, I recommend for anybody that wants to help us with anything we do, get a good pair of boots, waders, hip boots, because lots of what we do, we're always hanging out in mud and muck. And so it's always a good idea, if you're going to help out save coastal wildlife, to invest in a good pair of boots. Don't forget to dress for the weather. I can tell you right now, the May monitoring is often cold. Nighttime, it's cold. It might be like 70 or 80 degrees during the daytime, but as that sun is going down, it gets cold, especially along the coast. So dress for the weather. Always have some extra layers of clothes in your car, because sometimes it can be warm, but oftentimes it's cold, especially in May at night, it can be cold. So bring a sweatshirt, bring a jacket, bring something that you're going to get wet. You know, don't bring your nice clothes. Don't bring, you know, that expensive Gore-Tex jacket that you got for your birthday, for Christmas. It's going to get wet and dirty. So bring some old clothes, bring some warm clothes, dress warmly, but also think about something that's going to get dirty and wet. You want to bring a flashlight or a headlamp. Headlamps are helpful because it frees up your hands. You know, I like a flashlight. Some people like headlamps. If you can, try to get one that has a red filter on it. Because again, horseshoe crabs are very sensitive to light. And so a bright light shining in their face and their eyes freaks them out. They don't like it. And so try to get one with a red light. Sometimes the red light's not bright enough, and our waters tend to be really murky and cloudy. So it's not always easy to use a red light. So, you know, I have a lamp, I have a flashlight that has both the red light and a regular white light. And so if the water conditions allow me, I will use the red light. But if the water's really cloudy and turbid, I'll just use a regular white light. So you do what you can. And then, you know, sometimes, especially in June, sometimes the insects are out and they can be really bad. So if you're sensitive, try to put all that stuff on beforehand, because sometimes people are sensitive to the smells. And so try to put all that stuff on before you come and monitor our beaches for horseshoe crabs. Thunderstorms, sometimes the weather is not always cooperative. Sometimes it rains. And we will go out if it's raining. We will monitor horseshoe crabs if it's raining. But again, if you're feeling tired and, you know, it's raining, you don't want to come out in the rain, stay home. We don't, you know, there's people that will go out in the rain with me and count crabs. So don't worry about it. If you don't feel like doing it, stay home. However, if there's thunderstorms, we're not going to go on the beach, obviously. It's a safety issue. But we, you know, we'll check radar. And if it looks like, hey, maybe in a half an hour, the thunderstorms are going to go away, we might wait half an hour and then go out on the beach to count the crabs. So it just depends. I'm always looking at radar to see what the conditions are going to be. One year we got really lucky. We started monitoring horseshoe crabs at 8:30. There was a big storm from like 7:45 to like 8:30. It ended right at 8:30, right when we're starting to count the crabs. We got really lucky. So, you know, it just depends. We're gonna go out if it's raining. But if the weather's really bad, we might cancel. Usually I'll send an email by 5 o'clock to let you know if the weather's really bad. Sometimes there's a nor'easter. Sometimes the tides are really high and we just can't count the crabs. So there are conditions where we do cancel. It's rare, but there are times when we do cancel a horseshoe crab monitoring due to the weather. So check your email. I'll send an email out by 5 o'clock to let you know if it's canceled. Otherwise, we're going out. But if you feel tired, if you feel unsafe, if you don't want to drive in the rain, stay home. We'll get you another time. So these are the beaches that we monitor. We do a total of 5 sites. We do Cliffwood Beach. We do Keyport Harbor over by Cedar Street, around that area. Cedar Street Park, Cedar Street. Leonardo Beach over by the marina. Atlantic Highlands over by Many Mine Creek, and then Plum Island at Sandy Hook. We've been monitoring these sites for a long time now, and hopefully we get to continue to monitor these sites. Again, we do it on full moon and new moon evenings. These are the dates: Tuesday, May 11th, starting 8:45, Wednesday, May 26th, starting at 8:45, Thursday, June 10th, starting at 8:45, and Thursday, June 24th, starting at 8:30 p.m. So you might say to yourself, Joe, why do you do so late? Why are you doing it on weekdays? We do it because of the tides. So we try to do it a little bit after the high tide comes in, and we do it on new moon and full moon nights. So if it, if there was a full moon on a Saturday or Sunday, that's when we do it. But it just happens this year, the new moons and full moons fall on weekday nights when many people have to go to work or school the next day. So do what you can, and join us if you can. So if you're interested in volunteering, we ask that you register for a date. So think about which date you want to do. Which date are you available, and which site you want to join us. I will tell you right now, usually the Sandy Hook one is very popular, obviously so. And there are some rules. I don't even know if we're going to get the permit. I haven't got the permit yet for Sandy Hook to monitor the Plum Island site at Sandy Hook. Still waiting for that permit from the National Park Service. Because of COVID, I might not get it. And if that's the case, we'll have to modify it and maybe switch over to a beach in Highlands. I don't know yet. We'll see what happens. But usually the Plum Island site's pretty popular. So you might want to think of another place, but we're going to ask everybody to register. I'm not going to send the registration out till like a week before, because these are all free events. We don't charge people. There are other organizations along the East Coast that do charge money for people to come out and monitor horseshoe crabs. I don't feel comfortable doing that. It's citizen science. And at this point in time, I just don't really feel comfortable charging people to come out and doing any sort of citizen science event. This is why we have fundraisers throughout the year to raise money for the things that we do and for the things that we need. But for citizen science, it's all free. So if I open it up now, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to register, but then something's going to come along. So maybe something better is going to come along. Maybe somebody's going to invite you to go up to Cape Cod to look at whales. And you're going to say, horseshoe crabs or whales. I'm going to go with the whales. And so we generally wait for about a week or so to open up registration for each monitoring event. And that way people have a better idea of what they're doing, how they're feeling. If they're feeling sick, they might not want to register, things like that. So look for an email from Safe Coastal Wildlife about a week before each monitoring event to register, and then figure out what site you want to register at, and then register. So I will tell you, please register as soon as you see that email, because it does fill up fast. And again, we're only really asking for 10 people at each site to help us with monitoring and to tag the crabs. Now, again, you could feel free to come and watch us, but as far as the actual monitoring and tagging, we only need about 10 people. So if you want to do that, register early to help us, because it is a very popular event. As you could see by the amount of people that have come for the training, it's a big event. And so please register early. And you could register for all 5 or all 4 dates. That's fine, but you probably want to give some people who haven't done this before, give them an opportunity. So think about it. If you want to come all 4 times, great, but try to give some other people an opportunity as well too, to come out and help us with monitoring horseshoe crabs. This is the data we have so far. This is total horseshoe crab activity. We had a really good year in 2018, and then it crashed. We did monitor a little bit last year during COVID. In June, we monitored just in June. We didn't go out in May, but in June we did go out. We monitored a little bit, and we didn't find that many crabs as in the past. And so this is tend to be our cycle, that the crabs they tend to increase a little bit, and then they just crash. And 2018, they really went up high. We found a lot of crabs in 2018, and then it just went down, and it's going down. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2021. If the crab population continues to go down, or if it goes up a little bit, it'll be interesting to see. We don't find that many single females, and we really don't find too many clusters. And these are the things that we're really concerned about along Raritan Bay and Sandy Hook Bay, because you need the females to continue that population, and you want clusters, you want males fighting over females. And we don't find too much of that activity, a little bit, but not much. And so we're always concerned about that. And this is why we're always concerned about what's happening in New York State with the harvesting and different things like that. All right, so have fun, be safe. Always think safety first. And that's all I have to say. So let's see, open it up. Let's check out the chat line, see if anybody has any questions. So Joe, is there any research showing horseshoe crabs impacted by microplastics? All right, nice. I don't think there is any evidence of horseshoe crabs biting. I don't think they're studying because you know, horseshoe crabs are not a species that's consumed by people, at least in this country. And so when they study microplastics, they're studying species that people eat, like mussels and clams and fish and things like that. So if they are ingesting microplastics, I don't think there's really much data on that. If they are, they're not. They do eat horseshoe crabs in Asia, China, they do. Again, you could, so are you counting or tagging? So obviously if you're coming with a drill, you're gonna tag, right? So the beach captain will tell you, depending on how many people show up, whether you're counting or tagging. If we have a lot of people, we're gonna tag and count at the same time. If we don't have that many people showing up, so even though you might register, not everybody's gonna show up for whatever reason. Some people get sick, some people just feel bad and they just might not wanna show up. So if we don't have many people showing up, we're just gonna count crabs. Counting is the most important thing that we do. We really need to count the crabs. That's the most important thing that we do. Tagging is secondary. So if we get a lot of people helping us out, if we get our 10 people helping us out, we'll count and tag. But if we just get 3 or 4 people showing up, we'll just count the crabs. But obviously, if you really want to tag, make sure you bring your drill, because that's a good sign that, you know, we'll do some tagging. Is there any attempt to protect the egg sites from people? Good question. So right now, because we don't really have that much horseshoe crab activity, we really don't know where all the good egg laying sites are. And that takes time and that takes effort. That actually takes somebody going around and looking, measuring the beach, looking for eggs. And it's just so sporadic. It just hasn't been done. So hopefully as the horseshoe crab population goes up, we could actually protect more of our beaches from people and protect those eggs. So how do you get on the email list to register? Go to our website, go to Save Coastal Wildlife, www.savecoastalwildlife.org. If you're not receiving our emails already, please go to our website, register for our emails. All citizen science and volunteer projects, all that information is sent out via email. We don't do it through social media because social media is crazy. So we do it primarily through email. So please sign up to get our emails. That's where we send out all information for citizen science and volunteer projects. All of it's through email. We do give some information on social media, but all the good stuff we save for email. We save for our members. So please get on our email list, and you can do that by going to our website. On the front page right there, you could sign up, and very easy to do. We just ask for your name and for your email address. That's it. And you get all the good stuff. You find out all the good stuff what we're doing. Do you ever think of adding more monitoring sites and dates? Not so much dates, but sites. We're always thinking about adding more sites, but it takes permission to do this from the state and different organizations. And so it takes a commitment. We need a certain amount of volunteers and beach captains. And so once I feel comfortable that we have enough people, beach captains, we could certainly add another site. But also too, there's not many sites to really monitor. We're losing our horseshoe crab population. So there used to be a time that horseshoe crabs were all over the place, but there's not many places now. There's still a few more spots I would like to monitor, but I just don't have enough beach captains at this point in time. And so maybe in the future, we'll add a couple of more sites in the next couple of years. I will definitely let you know the results. Once I get all the data from the beach captains, I usually send that out to everybody to let everybody know what we found within like a day or two. And so once I get all the information, compiled all together, I send out an email letting everybody know what we found for horseshoe crabs. What's the octopus print book behind you? We'll save that for another time. All right. So, okay. Any questions? All right, I'm going to open it up. Anybody have any questions that you just want to ask me right now? I have a couple more minutes to go. We've been doing this now for a long, long time. Jeez, it's 9 o'clock already.
Hey.
Dang. I'm surprised nobody shut me up.
Yeah, shut up, Joe. Hey. This is Linda. Do you, if we did want to tag the crabs, I mean, we probably wait until June because there's not always a lot of crabs in May. What will we do if we want to get some tags?
So the peak season for horseshoe crab monitoring is the end of May and early June. That's when you're going to get the most crabs. Early May, not so much. Late June, not so much. So the one in May, late May, early June is the peak time for horseshoe crab mating. I would give all the beach captains their tags. So I'll either drop it off your house or you can come to my house and pick it up. We'll figure something out. I'll text you guys or call you or email you and we'll figure out a way as we get closer. The next couple of weeks, actually, I think we're probably going to have another beach captain meeting soon. So we'll go over all that stuff. But yeah, either you come to my house or I'll come to your house or you come to where I work and you can pick it up and get stuff like that. Any other questions that you just want to yell at me real quick? Y'all feel comfortable? Y'all feel good going out on the beach and counting and monitoring crabs? Yeah. How many people want to actually drill holes in crabs? We have a lot of people doing that. Linda, you want to do it? Yeah. All right, good. Well, make sure you get a drill. Got to get a cordless drill. That's important. Need that.
No.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, thank you everybody for coming out and joining me for, I thought it was just going to be a short little training, but it turned out to be much longer than I thought. So I apologize for, you have to, I feel like a college professor tonight. So I'm sorry I bored you if I did, but thank you for coming out and joining us. And hopefully I will see you on the beach. If you do have any questions, you could always email me in the meantime. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the beach, counting or tagging crabs or looking for crabs. Hopefully you can join us. And thank you very much for joining me tonight. Thanks, everybody. Have yourself a good rest of the night and a good weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.